Welcome to Into the Storm Leaders, the no BS podcast that ignites leadership potential and sparks innovation in the ever-evolving business landscape we all work in. Join us as we uncover inspiring stories and thought-provoking insights from proven leaders and share practical takeaways that enable courageous leadership. Get ready to charge into the storm and become a catalyst for better workplace culture. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Into the Storm Leaders. Got Ryan Mayer, ADHD coach, amongst many things, friend of Culture Shock. I'm excited for you to meet him today.
I've been looking forward to this. And I'll tell you what, you guys at home can't see this, but this studio is so legit. I've been updating my home office and I was just complimenting Joe and the team. It looks really good in here.
Thanks.
You guys have done a great job, honestly.
No leather-bound books, but lots of good ones. Pumped to have a conversation with Ryan today. We just met a few weeks back.
Have you ever had one of those times where you meet someone and it's like you've been friends for a long time? That's how I felt with you.
No bullshit. Same.
Yeah.
Right out of the gates. You know Jim Tennant and Pete Hansberger.
Sure do.
They're on our team here. You know anyone else?
Don't forget Ron.
You know Ron Kaminsky.
He may not know me, but I know him.
Right. So I've heard your name a lot, right?
Yeah.
In our L10 structure, we meet every week. We talk about wins and even personal best, business best. I've heard your name a couple times in the work that you've done with Jim.
Yeah.
And I think it was about 6 months after I joined. So maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
I was like, I got to meet Ryan Mayer. And it took me this long. And now I was upset with myself for a moment because after we did connect and we're talking about this podcast, it did feel like we'd been friends for a long time. I was like, I wasted a damn year. I knew this. I should have reached out to you sooner. But regardless, I could have waited a year longer as well. We're here today, man.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Joe. One of my favorite lines that I just texted to my client because I got to give him credit. It's his line. He says, we're exactly where we are meant to be. We're exactly where we're meant to be. So I didn't know you before then, so
right.
It's fine with me.
Yeah.
We're here now.
So after we had a conversation, I checked out your website. I've looked at some of the free guides, tools that you've shared out there. I've personally benefited from some of the work that you do. And I feel like a lot of our listeners, while we may have not spoken to it directly, we are an entrepreneurial community. There seem to be some correlations and tendencies. Everyone around time management, but then even more specifically, those with ADHD.
Yes.
And that's something you somewhat or all the way in specialize in and have brought to the forefront and directly address. Let's talk about it. So how did it start? What do you, anything for listeners, whether they have ADHD or not, that you can start with telling about yourself or about why this is the work that you do?
Well, first off, whether or not someone has ADHD or any other invisible disability or not, that's what I love about the kind of work that Culture Shock does and the kind of work that I do is that it's applicable to anyone. So I'm helping people to pick the goals they want to work towards, figure out a roadmap to get there, to overcome the obstacles that might appear. And I promise I'm not just saying this because it's the Into the Storm podcast, but I say to navigate the storms caused in their life by, in this case, ADHD. So my origin story, if you will, is coming out of college. I was so excited, like most young professionals, just to take the world, by storm. I keep saying storm, but to really jump in and make an impression right away. And I found it to be a lot more challenging than I had anticipated. And I've known since I was in high school that I have ADHD. And I know that in today's day and age, it's almost like a fad in a way to say, well, isn't everyone a little bit ADHD? And while some people might sometimes lose their keys or run a little bit late or not manage their time, when it becomes detrimental and it's a chronic thing that's negatively impacting several areas of your life, that's where it starts to get into the clinical level of ADHD. So I was struggling with that in my professional life, where, as I like to say, I was having a hard time matching my results with my intentions. So I knew what to do. I knew why it was important. I even knew how to do it.
Sure.
It was just the execution that kept being a struggle. So I kept looking for help that was specifically tailored to someone like me with ADHD, and I just couldn't find it. So I ended up becoming the help that I was looking for. So that's why I talk a lot about being a bridge builder, because I want to help people to get across and bridge that gap of where they are now to where they're wanting to go. And it's amazing when I talk to people, Joe. I've coached people. It still is wild for me to say this, but from 21 different countries around the world.
No way.
Mm-hmm. And what's amazing to me is that regardless of geographic location, income level, gender, race, ethnicity, background, whatever, people with ADHD and many other invisible disabilities have very similar challenges. So it starts to, I can see these patterns emerging, which tends to be where entrepreneurial minded people and visionaries, for those who are big fan of traction and EOS, can see those patterns. Tony Robbins talks about that entrepreneurs are the ones that see the patterns before other people do. Well, I'm seeing those patterns as I'm talking with people. So that's how I've built up my coaching practice, is something that I know would benefit myself, but also can bring remedy to the pain of some of these different challenges.
No doubt. There were quite a few things that you said there that resonated with me right out of the gates, with the mention of today, everyone that you hear it all the time,
Yeah.
or at least it is seems to be a common belief that everyone has some degree of it, that it almost minimizes that. Or
It does.
For me personally, because I do have ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and have only recently started to include others in that, right? Or directly address it and talk about it. And in my time since joining Culture Shock, there's been things that help me understand, or given me such peace, but also such encouragement that some of these things were strengths, or could be leveraged as strengths. So your mention, though, of how it's thought of or talked about was probably a large reason for me to not directly address it. It's like, how am I any different? Why? I never wanted to come across as an excuse,
Of course.
or something that I was blaming. So inherently, I just kept it to myself. Didn't feel it necessary to share.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been sort of freeing to be able to say it in a way of setting expectations. Not that I'm asking for anything different, but that, as you put it all the time, I can advocate for myself.
Exactly.
That stuck with me when I started to see some of what you do on social and some of your work. That concept of, you need to advocate for yourself. That's not ADHD specific.
Exactly.
That's in so many facets of life. When we're talking about leadership, when we're talking about career growth, you have to advocate for yourself. But when it comes to this, when it comes to these invisible things, talk more about that with us, Ryan. Like, just the concept of why that's so important.
This is why I have such a burning desire to get into companies to talk to them about their teams and their cultures, because you can just imagine that there are so many people that when they are there, they know, like I said before about myself, I knew what to do, but I was struggling to do it in the way that the company had set up for me to do it. So now that I have figured out different ways, different strategies to navigate through that, now I can go back and say, hey, here's how you can advocate for yourself about this. So instead of framing ADHD as an excuse, I'll say to people, you don't even have to disclose necessarily if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But you could say, we'll say team member to boss. The team member says, I want to be the best employee I can possibly be for you. I have found that the way that I can do that is if, and then fill in the blank with some of the very reasonable accommodations and little adjustments. Like what, Ryan? Great question, viewers. Thank you for hypothetically asking. Things like, can you send me the agenda for the meeting ahead of time so that I can be ready so that I don't feel overwhelmed when we get there?
Sure.
When we finish the meeting, can we take a few minutes, and EOS does a great job of this, by the way, and Culture Shock can help you to implement it, but to really get clear on what's everyone going to do coming out of this meeting. Because I think all of us have been part of meetings, unfortunately, where we meet for the sake of meetings sometimes, and you get to the end and it's like, well, wait, what was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And then the next meeting is spent catching up on what we talked about last time. So the point is sending something ahead of time, sending action items and who's responsible for what. And then other things that most people wouldn't think of, like shifting the hours. So people talk about jobs, they will immediately think of the 9 to 5.
Right.
Who decided that it was 9 to 5? Like, honestly, like who just decided? Someone at
Bill.
some point. Yeah, exactly.
I think it was Bill.
I think it was Bill. But if sometimes I'll have clients who are being reprimanded or disciplined because they run late, but they also, many people with ADHD tend to have sleep troubles. So what if the person, instead of working 9 to 5, they worked 10 to 6 or 11 to 7? Because when it comes down to it, results get respect.
Sure.
So what I've been helping my clients to advocate for is, as long as I'm getting the job done, who cares what time I do it? Because I think people get so caught up in the bureaucracy and this is how we've always done it, that they kind of are missing the point. The point is you want an employee who's going to do their job well and deliver results. So that's the kind of thing I help people to advocate for, to empower them to stand up for themselves and put structures in place to be more successful.
No doubt. Boy, when you talk through that, I had a conversation last week with the team, and it was tree service company up in New Hampshire. Hell, I've had 2 conversations in the past 2 weeks of similar tone about there were frustrations. There were things that the team wanted to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of expecting it to just be done for them, and getting upset because it wasn't, but then realizing like, I could have made this happen if I had advocated, if I had taken initiative to say, I can do things differently. I am empowered. They've been empowered. They just need to kind of break away from that status quo. I think we're conditioned not to think freely, but to do things to fit in with the team, the company, the way things have been done. And so many entrepreneurial companies are not that way.
Right.
At least not when they begin. But it's that like transfer of entrepreneurial mindset that is so important to second layer leaders, to others, to get them also embracing and recognizing like, oh, I have the ability, the power, if I do the right things, if I prepare thoughtfully, if I create space to have the conversation, if I show big picture understanding, I can advocate for myself for the betterment of the company. Like there's this cross between what you just said and that. And I think it connects really well with Into the Storm. It's probably something most would see as being uncomfortable, painful, scary. And it's fair to say it gets you to a better outcome faster if you just charge into it and speak up for yourself.
Big time. And what I'm seeing out there is that unfortunately, most companies, again, although neurodiversity and awareness around invisible disabilities is on the rise, which is really good.
Sure.
Companies still struggle with that, what you just mentioned about the company in New Hampshire, that they want things to be a different way and they're frustrated that maybe the team isn't doing it the way they think they should. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about it not being an excuse, like ADHD and other invisible disabilities are recognized by the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1973. So it's a legit medical condition. But the hardest thing is that the reason why, in case anyone's wondering why it's called invisible disability, I mean, you can tell if someone has a hearing impairment or a physical impairment that causes them maybe to use crutches or a wheelchair, for example. But that kind of disability should be ADHD should be treated with the same respect and accommodations as someone with a physical disability. But it's so much harder for a company to think that way because the disability is happening between our ears.
No doubt.
Yeah. So unless people start speaking up, the change won't happen.
Are you familiar with fundamental attribution error? You heard of this before? It's a cognitive bias.
Yes.
But
like, tell me how
the
you're
connection there.
Yeah.
We so often attribute flaws or issues, I should say. We attribute issues that we see in others to being character flaws, though we attribute issues in ourselves to be based on circumstance or situation that we're in. So when we're getting on the freeway and somebody slams on the brakes in front of us, that guy doesn't know how to drive. What a jerk, what an idiot. You drive by and you might give him, let's call it the thumbs down.
Yeah.
I like the thumbs down more than
a
any
hand
other
gesture,
finger anyway.
thumbs down. Yeah.
But then the next day, you do the same thing because you got a call that your mother's in the hospital because you're the coffee just spilled. You woke up late because you're up all night with your kids. For any of these number of reasons, something happened in the moment. You missed the guy in front of you slowing down a little and had to slam on your brakes and cause the same reaction from the person behind you, and you get that thumbs down. We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt sometimes in that scenario, right? Attributing it to, well, it's because of this. Yet in others, we attribute it to a flaw in that person rather than understanding it could be the circumstance or situation that we have built for them.
Yes.
That they are in. Like when you talk about the invisible, I heard there was an example you shared about a copier or about something that was obstructing your ability to work effectively. So I want to get into storms throughout your career and how you've recognized it and helped others charge through them as well. Was that a storm, the disruptive workplace? And do you get how I connected that thought?
Yeah. And to touch on that theme before I go to the story, because it's a great story.
Thank you.
But first of all, I thought with the car hitting the brakes, I thought that you were going to say, when you go up to give the person the thumbs down, you see that there was actually a tire in the middle of the road or something like that.
And that would be a great example of it, right?
But then what I was thinking, and this is what I tell a lot of people when I take them through my neurodiversity 101, just helping them to understand, like, okay, what is neurodiversity exactly? Well, what I'll say to them is treating someone with ADHD like a neurotypical, which just means someone with like I'm using air quotes, standard brain wiring, would be like saying to someone with diabetes, like my uncle has type 1 diabetes. And it would be like saying, hey, why can't you process your sugar? It's like, well, that's how my body is. Like, I don't produce insulin. Well, you know what? John and Jane are able to manage their sugar just fine. They don't need a pump. They don't need injections.
Yeah. What the hell? Manage your sugar better.
You need to try harder. You're not focusing enough. So when they're saying something to an ADHD person about like, you need to just be more focused. You need to concentrate. You need to, this one always gets me, prioritize. And it's like, it's not that the person doesn't know that's what they're supposed to do. It's that is it that they won't or they can't? And sometimes it's that they can't. It's not, to your point, it's not set up in a way that's conducive for them.
Sure.
So before we hit record, Joe did a great job of asking, hey, is there anything around the studio that we need to adjust? And I just breathed this sigh of relief because I said, thank you for asking. Can you move like the microphone that was jiggling, the water that looks like it's in Jurassic Park, the light that's in my eyes, all of these visual distractions, because I want to be able to be 100% present and not thinking about the thing, which is the segue into my story of, it was almost like something out of a movie because it was the first day I was reporting to work at a new enterprise level sales job. And it was in an open office environment, which is sort of, for many, the last like couple decades, I'd say is kind of the cool, hip, fashionable way to have an open office environment. They sat me down next, they're like, here's your workspace, Ryan. And no joke, Joe, it was within arm's reach of a printer, which, okay, if you're in an office setting, those are going to be printers. Well, this was the only printer for all 200 of the sales team and sales support staff that was on the floor. So anytime anybody printed anything, it was coming out right here next to my desk. So for someone who has trouble managing their attention, that was really rough for me. So that's when I invested in a really nice pair of noise canceling headphones. Best individual electronic purchase I ever made. But that could be something, all kidding aside, that a company, like an employee, could advocate to their employer for.
Yeah.
Because as long as it's not, if it's reasonable financially, like, a couple $100 for a really nice pair of noise canceling headphones. I ended up, after that, I also asked to be moved because I was right along the main walkway. So anytime anyone was entering or exiting the sales floor, which was all the time, I was distracted. So there's just, I like to say, little hinges swing big doors. So just these little changes. So once I was able to be turned around and I had noise canceling headphones, it was way easier for me to concentrate.
I'm grateful for how we have our office set up. I can jump into a session room or in here and have to be mindful sometimes because I do want to also be in proximity to connect and
of course
be intentional about that. But the ability to eliminate some of that distraction has a huge swing in my ability to be productive, right? Say you're neurotypical leader, but want to enable your team to perform at their best in their best surroundings. Like, I guess, what are some things that they might look for, that they might do, that they might ask?
I think it's important for leaders to keep in mind that different people learn in different ways. So for example, I process information best auditorily. So I am much more likely to start and retain information from a professional development book if I can get it on audiobook. So when I'm in, as Zig Ziglar would call it, Automobile University, I can retain that information a lot better than I would if I sat down and tried to read the same thing. Part of that is because I'm only focusing on driving and listening, as opposed to if I'm just at my house, I'm hearing the kids are running around, somebody's phone's ringing, there's music in the other room. So a manager can ask, how do you best process information? Like, is the format of our meetings, is the format of our office, if we have one-on-ones or if we have a team meeting, is there anything that would help you? And they could ask this individually or put out like an anonymous survey perhaps of,
Sure,
is there anything we could do differently? And I mentioned this earlier, but something like having a piece of paper with the agenda for the meeting, and then even just a little area at the bottom for action items, and then who's going to do that thing and what's the deadline. So that's something very simple. But then also, why is it that everyone has to sit down for meetings? I will sometimes tell my clients, because we meet typically over Zoom, because I have clients over the world, and I'll say, would you be interested in doing what I call a walk and talk? So we do audio only, and we'll walk around, because humans are made to move. Humans are made to connect. So to your point about spending some time with your colleagues, but also the benefit that someone with ADHD gets from cardiovascular exercise is exponentially more than someone who doesn't have an invisible disability. So what I've noticed, and the way I explain it is, if I go for a brisk walk, about 10 to 15 minutes in, all of a sudden my clarity, it's like the brain fog just starts to go away. So my point there, to address your question, is managers could say, hey, for our one-on-one, do you just want to walk? We can take a walk around the building. We can go outside. We could have a team meeting, but what if we took a walk and we all talked?
Yeah.
Like, they're small things. That doesn't cost anybody any money. But it's just a way to not have people sitting there like scrolling on their phones, falling asleep.
Right. And certainly, even if you or your team don't have ADHD, it couldn't hurt to still adopt that sort of, process approach, because it shows care,
Yes.
humanity, compassion, being genuine and thoughtful enough to ask and to do something different. I feel like we're so often in this, whether it be falling into the status quo or just going into our own autopilot. We're doing things the way that we were taught or the way that we've learned and become accustomed to doing. The more you can disrupt that.
There's been so many times throughout my career when I've attempted to advocate for myself, and the response that I got many times was, well, that's not the way we do it here. So it's unfortunate because it's just so short-sighted,
right?
That it's like we're missing the point though. If I can do my job better by making this slight adjustment, why would we not do that?
An inline point with it, and a bit of a challenge too. At least how I've personally tried to overcome when encounter with that scenario, and a lot of, because that comes up a lot, is in the emerging leaders, the groups that I work with, it's, well, they start to get quieter because when they have tried to voice things, it's no, that's not how we do it here, or that's not a priority, or what have you. If you default to ownership, right, and it's not that you should blame yourself, but still it's healthy to default to ownership and think, is there something I could have done differently to impact that outcome? Could I have proposed it in a different manner? Could I have created that space? And I think that ties back into the advocating for yourself, but also then thinking of that person's point of view, what they have going on, understanding them as a human, what motivates them, and what do they need for you to be able to more effectively influence that change that you need, right?
I'm so glad you bring this up, Joe, because that's why as I look back on my career, I don't hold any resentment towards my former leadership teams that I worked with, because many times they just didn't know. And I also wasn't as well equipped as I am now to be able to articulate what I needed.
Right.
So I think that when you talk about like, okay, hold on, I had a really good point. Let's rewind it. You made the point of, taking ownership. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And we're back right before the break.
Welcome
Ryan
back,
was going
folks.
to tell a story and now he remembers his point. So if, like, let's say, for example, I'm trying to advocate for myself to you, who's my leader. Well, when I come to you, I should be thinking about, what are your objectives? What are your KPIs? Who are you reporting up to and what are they asking of you?
Sure.
And then positioning, to your point, positioning the request in a way where I'm keeping your interests in mind. Like, hey, Joe, hey, boss Joe, I know that you want me to produce X revenue this quarter. As you know, I'm a little bit short on that. I've come up with a couple ideas of how I think I can do that. So coming in proactively, so it's not making excuses. It's like, hey, I want to do better. And then saying why I think this would be good for me and our team is, and then presenting a couple of the benefits too.
Which often could be just better use of your superpower, of your ideal working environment.
Precisely.
That you can now commit to this level of performance because you're helping me create that space and opportunities for me to be my best.
Yeah.
Right?
And so always thinking about, like, not just coming in it from a selfish perspective, but honestly, like, I always tell my clients, think about what are your duties as assigned. In other words, like in the job description, what does the company expect of you? Are you checking all those boxes? And if you're not, like, figure out a way to make it work for you and talk with your leadership team. They don't want to have to replace you or put you on a performance improvement plan. Like, everyone would much rather that, like, you're getting along and doing well.
Right. If you need help, speak up.
Yeah.
Right. And often you don't know that until somebody else has helped you get there.
Right.
Right. And you may on your own, it just might take a bit longer. It sounds like that's what you help in some way. People do, right? Advocate for themselves, maybe recognize some of these storms that they're having. We talked a little bit about Colby before we got started, and I can't help but bring it up because even how I perceive myself in comparison with how I feel like what's expected of me from my employer,
Sure.
the Colby system has a number of things that help us better understand and have language for how we naturally take action, what brings us energy versus stress when we're at our best. The first, the Kolbe A, is your innate way of doing,
Yes.
instinctive strengths. Your Kolbe B is what you think others expect of you, right? So often, if I feel my leadership team, my company expects something of me that's not in line with who I naturally am, it's going to cause me some turmoil.
Yes.
And we later find out that that's not always the case. What I feel is expected of me is not truly expected, right?
Bingo.
So communicating more openly is something I have a fairly high degree of certainty you probably talk to your coaching clients about quite a bit, right? Break it down for me. And you don't need to, of course, share any names or anything like that, but just in the work that you've done, are there commonalities? Are there things that you can now predict more people are struggling with than others, right? The storms that they're maybe facing that, and then what do you do to help?
Well, I loved that you mentioned Kolbe and just like your instinctual, what you do best. And that's one of the pillars of my Conquer Your ADHD system.
Sure.
Which I just was checking on the trademark today, by the way. Pretty proud of that. Yeah. Which
it's not the easiest thing in the world or the quickest thing in the world.
I was just going to say, for someone with ADHD, and it leads to my next topic, which is something I refer to as your attention battery. So there's things that, like me being here with you, this is energizing for me. So my battery charging up. The exact opposite was happening when I was on the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO website. Wow, was my battery draining, because it's like all these forms and I have to check the box and add the whatever. So I take my clients through a strengths-based approach and say, when are you happiest? What are the list of the parts of your job or your life that you really enjoy and where time just disappears and you're just in flow, versus the things where you're like a kid in grade school or you're looking at the clock, like, when is this going to end?
Get me out of here.
Yeah. And that's what's so nice about, I'm going to say, being grown-ups and especially being entrepreneurs. We have much more mobility when it comes to what are you going to work on?
Yeah.
And I want to give Gino Wickman the shout out that I'm always saying, and I just said it this morning on my group coaching call, delegate to elevate. Like, if there's something you don't like doing, let someone else do it, because there's someone on the team somewhere that actually, even though it sounds twisted to me, they enjoy doing it.
No doubt. It breaks what, like, conventional thought that you delegate your least important administrative function things, when in reality, you can get to a sweeter place that you're getting more energy from your work if you're delegating based on your instinctive strength or your natural, like, what brings you joy, satisfaction, where you offer value and are skilled. When you delegate a little bit differently, you can empower other people to do the stuff that you didn't want to do anyway, right? Or even eliminate things.
Yes.
There's probably some things we're doing, and I love that this is getting into time management because you help folks with that, right? Mm-hmm. It's at the center of this, it seems, that maybe we don't need to be doing it all, and we can just get rid of.
I'm so glad we're on this topic, because this is another analogy that I use, that if you only take a couple of things away from our conversation, here's one of them. Most people know who Shaq is. NBA All-Star.
Kazam.
And his great work in Kazam. And I literally have a Shaq CD at my house.
Using Steel too, that superhero movie.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the some of the more obscure things might be the Lakers, the Heat, the Magic, and all that. But
you may have heard of those. But anyway, he has a certain skill set on the basketball court that he does really well. But then, obviously, when you think of like free throws, it was laughable to see Shaquille O'Neal at the free throw line. But think about it. Every basketball player should be able to shoot free throws. So if you're asking someone whether they have invisible disabilities or not, and this is why I say these concepts apply to everyone, asking someone to do something outside of their area of strength, like me doing the trademark thing today was like Shaq shooting free throws. So like, does he make some? Sure. But that's not where you want him. You want him down in the paint, knocking people around. Just like you want people like Joe and I here talking about concepts, inspiring people. And so that's what I try to help my clients with is figure out what brings you, like the other sports analogy is think of like a quarterback and a lineman. Like they're both football players. They're both on the team.
Sure.
They're both important, but they play very different roles, have very different skill sets. You don't want to have your lineman playing quarterback. Well, why not? Everyone else is able to do it. So it's like, you just think about, many of us are specialists.
Sure.
So why should everyone be forced to be average in a whole bunch of things when really, especially those of us who are neurodivergent, we have specialties that we do really well with.
No doubt. Did you get to the place where you understood yourself well enough to identify and articulate those things? Was it on your own? Did you have anyone help you get there to that understanding of what's your free throws? What's your putbacks?
Well, yeah, I was just talking to Pete Hansberger, fellow, Culture Shock team member. I'm sure you said is he on some of the podcast episodes?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. He's one of our hosts.
So Pete, heck of a player. My last name is Mayer, so I like to jokingly say the Mayer mid-range. So like you would think as a point guard, like, oh, the 3-point, it's like, that's just not my thing. But get me open like just a couple feet inside the arc, and that's my sweet spot. So I knew that with my natural skill set for what I did well in the workplace, it's what I do well in life. Getting to know people, being genuinely interested, just being, I always say like having a zest for life. Like people notice that about me. And I, in a very neutral way, I realize that that's different, usually in a good way.
Sure.
But I also know what my quote unquote free throws, my weak spots are. So as I progressed through my corporate career, I was much more intentional about saying, hey, this is not something I do well. Whether or not that was honored or not is a whole different story. But yeah, I always knew what I did well. And I was just thinking about it today as I was on a call. Like, man, I just love what I do. And I've been a coach now for 4 years, and being able to help others that are in that dark place where I used to be, there's nothing more fulfilling for me. So I'm just encouraging anyone who's watching or listening, life is too short to work jobs that you don't like and you're not good at.
Right. There's other options.
Yeah.
Misery loves company. Right. So if it is your attitude, the zest or absence of it is contagious, right? Like we affect others and influence others far more than we grasp in the moment, positively, negatively. And we then take that home, and it impacts their families and our families. And if we recognize that, the way that we show up and make a choice to energize, to focus on positive or what you can control instead of the doom and gloom complaining, there's this concept called we control our earth. Earth being your effort, E being your effort, A being your attitude, R being your reaction, T being your thoughts, and H being your habits. Those are in our direct control. So we choose how we want to show up and have that impact on others.
What was the E?
E was effort.
Effort.
And I'll put something up here as well. We've got a visual. It was from a softball coach. I saw it a while ago and was like, boy, does that have relevance in everyday life and especially in leadership. And the reason I asked about if you identified your own strengths and weaknesses, if anybody helped you with it, I think we've chalked that up to just the generic interview question of tell me about your weaknesses. Yeah. Where it's like, I try too hard. I'm too committed.
I give 110%. All that. Yeah.
And that extra 10%, it's hard, but I make it happen. We don't speak candidly about it because we don't know how to discuss it or don't have language and full recognition of it. Quite a few things have helped me recently get a better understanding of it. But holy shit, Ryan, do I value the people in my life who've actually cared enough to help me get there and ask. And as leaders, right, even if you're listening to this, you're watching it right now, and you're not neurodivergent, right? You're neurotypical. You don't have much of a relationship at all with ADHD or familiarity with other invisibles. Still caring enough and recognizing that there's such value in a leader, a mentor, offering that service of helping people determine where they want to go. Like, that's our job. It's a responsibility we have. It sucks sometimes because that means we have to say things that they don't want to hear but need to hear. But it also means we have the opportunity to help them identify a path. Like, asking questions. If I meet a team and one of the first things I'll ask their leader is like, well, what do they aspire to do? What do they enjoy most? What do they lose energy from? Or what are the things that frustrate them? Like, you can very quickly have those conversations that show genuine interest, that help you, better understand your team and their motivations. What you'll quickly find, though, if you don't accept the BS first response generic answer, if you break autopilot and pause for a moment to say, well, what do you really like? Or for real, think about this. When have you been at your best, where you come home with more energy and you can't wait to tell somebody else about your workday versus those that you don't ever want to think about again? And then helping people to get to like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year from now, what does that look like? Describe it, define it. Let's help you get there. Because at the end of the day, I don't expect anyone I work with, I don't expect any working relationship to be permanent or forever. Whether it's a month, a year, 10 years, as long as it's mutually beneficial, it's like you want people to leave better than you found them.
Yep.
So we don't need to pretend that the job you're in is the forever home. But if you'll give me your best while you're here, I'll help you identify and set you up for success, give you opportunities to help you advocate. Like, I feel like that's something that isn't necessarily talked about enough as like the critical role of a leader.
I think people honestly forget about the difference between a manager and a leader, because a manager will get people to do tasks. They manage the work.
Sure.
Whereas a leader, I just think about like a leader, like a Braveheart kind of character of like inspiring the people, even if they're a little tentative, but getting them really engaged and bought into, like, hey, I'm invested to wanting to make this work. It's really about knowing them. And what I loved about what you said is that you go in and ask, and it says so much about the companies that are having a company like Culture Shock come in to literally do just that, like have some shocking kind of conversations, because asking them, hey, what do all of your team members, what energizes them? I can just imagine there's probably some deer in headlight moments like, wait, what? Isn't that what you're supposed to figure out, kind of thing? But no, I go back to that phrase I said before, little hinges swing big doors. That if you're a leader out there and you just ask that question of, hey, what really lights you up? Like, how are we doing on that here in your job? What could we do better? Do you have any ideas of what we could do to leverage your strengths more?
Maybe even take a walk around the office to ask those things. Take a walk outside, to your point of, right, it being conversational. And
the couple of times in my career where a manager took me out to lunch, it didn't even have to be anything fancy, but just like, wow, you care about me that much. Just showing you care. And it made me, the challenges that I've had and the times that I've been, as I like to call it, liberated from my jobs, I think about how if they just would have asked and tried to get to know me a little bit better, things could have been way different. That it's there, they are missing out. Like, that's the thing is, and that's the stark kind of startling message that my neurodiversity training in companies is bringing people is this shock of, whoa, because if you think about what's the turnover rate, very quick questions that can like cut right to the chase.
Yeah.
How much does it cost you to backfill this? Well, what about the training? How much do you have to pay to the recruitment or HR team to find the people? So you'd obviously much rather keep the team you have and help them to harness their strengths rather than constantly replacing just because they're not doing it the way we are telling them they must.
Yeah. Do you work with any, I guess let's get into who you work with most. I imagine, well, as an ADHD coach, most of them probably have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But is it always on a one-on-one basis? Are you working with any companies that offer your services in some capacity to the larger workforce? Are they executives? Are they managers?
When I first started, it was just one-to-one, but I inspired a little bit by culture shock and wanting to fill an entire stadium full of people that we've helped. I wanted to help more people faster. So I decided to start ramping up attention on my group coaching model, which is now my primary, when I do the B2C of helping consumers, helping individuals, I say, hey, why don't you jump in? I'll still do some CEOs might want to do more of like a hybrid model or solo coaching with my elite package. But for the most part, it's group coaching. And it's just so magical.
Yeah.
Because especially for people who, imagine, Joe, like your entire life, you felt like the outcast, like, man, like you have felt broken. You felt like you just can't get it right. You've been told, people, I think the stat is by age 5, children with ADHD have had 20,000 more negative interactions than a child who doesn't have ADHD. So think about that kind of impact as you move forward and now you're an adult. You've been told you've been doing it wrong the entire time. So then imagine coming into a room of people who have gone through some of these same traumatic, challenging experiences and being like, wow, these are my people. They get me.
I'm not alone. It's not something that's wrong with me. It's
for the first time. It's the first time for some people that they've ever felt accepted. So anyway, then I started thinking, okay, that is good. But what would be even better is if I can get into companies, because to your point earlier, and I'm so glad you said it this way, if you can make things better in the workplace, that's going to spread to every other aspect of the person's life. So now maybe they're not driving directly to a bar on the way home, or maybe they're not doing some retail therapy and buying stuff that they don't need just to distract themselves from work. Or maybe they're not having as many relationship challenges in their marriage because they're having to stay so late at the office or whatever. So yeah, I decided I'm going to go to the companies and help to educate them with some of these simple but powerful things that they can do to help just unlock the potential of their teams.
Yeah.
Again, and it doesn't matter if they have invisible disabilities or not, but especially if they do, this is going to help them.
The few examples you just gave there about being late to places, getting stuck at work, and that having relational strain. And then what was the other? It was retail therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never correlated, maybe the time management aspect and the running late to things, but not the financial aspect or kind of the dopamine rush that is achieved or sought after, which could have correlation to ADHD. And can you speak to that for just a moment? Because if maybe a listener, actually any listener who has ADHD or not, who hasn't connected those sort of storms and how they could be a byproduct of the invisible that is mental health or ADHD. Can you speak to either of those, like those stressors, those storms of relations with other people and finance storms, right? Or the retail therapy thing that you mentioned?
So I was just jotting down. Remember before when I talked about talking with people from all over the world and how they start to fall into these buckets of different challenges that they're having that are so similar to others. Many of them correlate with the core symptoms of ADHD. So you'll have things like impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, time management, hyperactivity. So these are all things that, if you think about how they might impact literally any area of life. So, okay, someone's stressed at work. They're really feeling low, like we were talking about before, the attention battery is down. So they're like really down on themselves. But if they feel good, at least for a minute, if they go buy something new and shiny. Or like folks with ADHD have an expected lifespan that is 13 years shorter than people who don't. And that's because of things like job loss, poor health because they make poor choices, like, substance abuse, not eating the right foods. So this is just like this, I call it fingerprints of ADHD. It's everywhere in your life. So time management. So like someone might be getting reprimanded for not being on time for a meeting or running late to an appointment. And yet, even though they're trying, there's this concept known as time blindness, where it doesn't matter how hard someone tries, they just don't realize the passage of time. To give someone who may not understand this or ever experienced it firsthand, to give you an idea, imagine that someone tells you you need to leave the house to get to a family gathering. You need to leave in 15 minutes. But unbeknownst to you, someone turned up the speed of the clock. So now it goes, and then you look up, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. It's only been 5 minutes. You can't expect me to be ready already. But really it was like that much time passed. That's what it's like to have time blindness.
Some of what, like the way that you explain things and your own experience and that you hear from clients and such, probably part of the reason that you've got, let's just call it a fairly large following on social media. A lot of folks who've probably heard and seen, and who you help just by being able to show them they're not alone and being able to relate some of those issues in ways that they don't connect for themselves is a pretty powerful freaking thing. Like you inspire me. I'm glad that some of the questions weren't asked by your former leaders that could have made things a lot easier and kept you in that path, because
I think
we are where we're supposed to be.
Oh, I see how you brought that
we
back.
are where we're supposed to be. And I am a firm believer that you're supposed to be doing this because
Thank you. Me too.
You're helping people. I hope that this conversation helps people, even if it just levels up awareness a little bit of others, whether or self-awareness or social awareness, and helps us pause for a moment. I think there's such value in a clarity break or a pause, a way of stopping or disrupting the autopilot, that habit self that just goes, right? Hopefully these episodes are an opportunity to do that. And conversations with you, for me, certainly have been through individual coaching, through group coaching, your community.
Yeah.
Right. The community that you were talking about, let's open that up a little further, because if what we've discussed today has been emotion invoking for anyone listening, as it has for me, I think it's some powerful stuff. Like, I have every intention of continuing dialogue, not just with you as a human, a friend, a professional, but also as a client in some regard through the community and other things that you're doing. Let's talk about what those things are. So if somebody does want to do something about it to help themselves and to benefit from your wisdom and what you've created, how might they do that? What are the options and venues?
Thank you for asking. And I was just talking to a brand new client this morning, and I love that you said like to do something about it, because I said what coaching ultimately does is it answers the question and it asks the question, what are you going to do about it? So like we have these challenges. We can't change the way our brain is wired, but it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility to figure out a way. So that's why ADHD isn't an excuse, but it is a fact that it's real. So what I found for the first couple of years is I would have these great, deep emotional conversations with people who saw my content on social media, or they Googled me or whatever. And by the way, the number is over 500,000 followers across all platforms.
And growing.
Yeah, and growing. Thank you. But what broke my heart is when we would get to the end of the conversation and we would talk about the exchange of value and what the price points were. And regardless of how low things were, they'd be like, oh, I can't do that. I'm barely, my one client, former client said, Ryan, I have to choose between paying you, which is so valuable to me, paying you or paying rent. And so it's like, that's where people are at sometimes. So with that in mind, to answer your question, you can be a part of the movement that we're creating for free. So I'm on Patreon. It used to be a different platform, but now it's Patreon. So you can look on my website, which is ryanmayercoaching.com. You can look me up on the social medias, which I know Joe is going to put all the links and everything. But it's ADHD Coach Ryan, or on Instagram, ADHD Coach Ryan Mayer. But the point is, I want the joke that I make. It's like, yes, I might be considered an influencer on social media. The only thing I don't like about social media, Joe, it's not very social. It's like a one-way. I'm here. Maybe people might comment or like it or share it, and that's great, and thank you. But I want to get to know you. So I said, join the community, so then we can have conversations. I do a community coaching call for basically a cup of coffee, and so people can join that. So I plan on very soon, this is going to be like hundreds of people coming into these coaching calls and being like, wow, all of these people are going through the same challenges as me. And then I can share with them some of these simple concepts that have helped me and I have figured out can help people to unlock these abilities that they do have.
Yeah.
And to also come to grips with the fact, and this is for anyone, not just ADHD. We feel like we should be able to do something. And like, we'll get frustrated if we can't. What if we just had what I call T.U.A, total unconditional acceptance of like, this is just how we are. So going back to that, like my uncle who has diabetes, no one's ever going to, like, he shouldn't keep getting mad at himself for not being able to process sugar like everyone else does. It's never going to happen. But yet, how many times do we as leaders, entrepreneurs, people with ADHD, we keep kicking ourselves and we're in this perpetual, like, beating ourselves up about not getting things done in the way we think we should.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can join the community for free. I do group coaching. That's my favorite way to do it. And then the other offering is getting out into the corporate setting to be able to help educate people, empower the team members, but also educate and equip the management teams to just better serve their people that they don't realize are suffering right now.
Yeah.
And we're back after our commercial break where Ryan realizes he's wearing the same shirt today in the interview as he is on his website.
Yes.
That's amazing. Because I just looked up, I'm like, man, I look good in that shirt. Whoa. I'm wearing the same shirt as on my website.
And if you want to see for yourself, go ahead and head on over to Ryan Mayer Coaching.
That beautiful. So you were just asking me about the SMS course.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of this because I literally haven't seen anything like it. The company that runs it had reached out to me and said, hey, we love your content. We're all about embracing neurodiversity. Would you want to partner with us to put out this course? I'm like, let's go. So I titled it, How to Find Work That Works for Your ADHD. So whether someone is unemployed or underemployed, or you're just not happy with your work, I created this as sort of like just thinking back on myself 10, 15 years ago in corporate. Like I like I said before, I want to become the help that I needed but couldn't find.
Yeah.
And what's great about this is since there is only one of me, I took everything that I help people with when it comes to job search, because I have a background in HR and recruitment, and I distilled it down into a 10-day course where, this is probably the best part, there's no username, no passwords to forget. You just go, you sign up, and that moment you get the, hey, it's Coach Ryan text from me right onto your phone whether it's WhatsApp or just SMS text message. And it's a 10-day course that has downloadable resources. It has video clips and it has audio clips. And I got to create a few of my own GIFs, which was pretty cool.
Nice.
But yeah, it just helps to step people through the whole journey, even from why do we work anyway? So I get pretty deep on it right off the bat.
Love it.
But yeah, so that's available. And I'm going to offer a discount too. So I'll have, let's call it shock. No. In case they forget about the K, we'll call it Culture 30.
Culture 30.
Culture 30 for
I like it. What's the
discount.
30 for?
For 30% off.
Boom.
Of the course, which I just reduced the price today. So get it while it's hot.
Yeah, check that out.
Yeah.
All right. I saw and downloaded some of the things on your site as well, from a time management with ADHD guide to some of the other things that you're mentioning. It really seems like you are trying to help first. You are very sharing of things that have helped you. And I like and learn from some of the messages I got from you, part of the journey, right? After becoming part of the network or subscribing, and look forward to checking out the course myself as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm all about the abundance mindset. That's kind of like, if I could sum up everything I do, is the abundance mindset of, I know the more people that I can help, it's just going to come back to me anyway. One of my favorite quotes is, money is an echo of value. So if you just keep putting a ton of value out there and sharing resources with people, it's going to come back to you anyway.
Yeah.
So my goal is to be a beacon of hope for other people, to realize they're not alone, not anymore, because I can be in your corner, and to just help people know, like, there's a path out. So let me show you. We're going to have to run through the storm, but we're going to get there, and it's sunny on the other side. Even
if it's painful, downright, uncomfortable, something you've been avoiding for a long time, you'll get to that sun, that better outcome, if you do something about it.
Exactly.
If you start and take the first step into it, on a lot of fronts. I hope that this is that first step for many people. And I'm confident that even outside this podcast, you're going to keep putting yourself out there, growing what you're doing in the community that you've built, in that pursuit of helping more and more folks understand themselves better, advocate for themselves better, understand their teams better.
Yes.
And be better leaders for their people through that understanding and that care.
And like we said before, I take great pride in helping leaders to be able to see and then leverage the invisible capabilities of their team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am getting the word out, but is it okay if I come back?
I'd love it. Yeah. Well, you can wear that same shirt.
All right.
In fact, I'll see if I can find it somewhere as well, or at least one that matches.
Yeah. Perfect.
Orange was one of our brand colors. So it made sense. You were that thoughtful in advance. You're like, all right, I don't have the buffalo suit today, but you've got the orange shirt.
That was in the wash. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it again. Especially since I'll go down this journey myself, right? And be able to report back and share findings. And I think that the other side of the healthiest relationships is the criticism. I'm going to criticize you as well from a place of love and care, right? To say, hey, here's how, have you thought of this? Or it could get better here. Or this is what really grinded my gears and I thought was bullshit, Ryan. But I got a feeling you've already gone through some filters of that.
This is when I knew Joe and I were going to be great friends, because I'm all about offering feedback to people. I love it. And when Joe, like just a couple days after our conversation, he's like, hey, just want to let you know, I found a couple of typos and a couple of other things that I just, you want to have excellence. And I'm like, this is amazing. So thank you.
Love it, man.
For the radical candor.
Yeah. Ooh, what a concept and great way to bring it home today, because that's a powerful, powerful model.
Yeah.
Lots of folks in ruinous empathy.
We don't want that.
No, it's a service we give to people we care about, right? To be direct, to criticize in a compassionate way. I love the blend of, since Into the Storm is all about courageous leadership, it's like, all right, but you're not a bull in a china shop. There's courageous compassion.
Yes.
Right? Recognizing for those we do care about most, it's our responsibility to challenge them, to go there. Ryan, anything else for folks struggling with ADHD, feeling connected with, but still afraid to take the first step, or just anyone out there who listened to this today? any final notes for them or things that you want to share before we wrap?
Yes. I'm going to look directly into the camera on this one because
I'll stare here.
it's so important. Okay. There we go. If you're watching this and you're currently in a dark place, I want to let you know you're not alone. You're not broken. You might just be wired a little bit differently. And the realization and the epiphany that I had that helped to set me free was I was associating my value as a human being to my performance evaluations at work. So if I was a meets most at work, I felt like I was a meets most person. So I just want to let you know, you are an exceeds expectations person. You meet everything. You are amazing just the way you are. So don't associate how you perform at work with your personal worth. So I just want to give you that and let you know that we can go through this thing together. Because yeah, we'll go through the storm. It'll be painful, but it's a lot more fun if you go with your friends. So thanks for tuning in today to the Culture Shock Podcast.
No doubt. Into the storm leaders. Appreciate you. As always, listeners, hope you got something out of this. Ryan, you're the man. I just genuinely appreciate you as a human being and look forward to continuing the conversation here for another episode, but also outside of it as we go about fatherhood and life in every facet of it. So thanks very much, man. I sincerely appreciate you.